It is said that somewhere beneath the endless green heart of the Amazon, a city sleeps, not one of stone and empire, but of memory and breath. Beneath the curling vines and the hush of ceaseless rain, there are shapes that the jungle refuses to swallow. Perfect circles of earth, straight lines carved into what should be chaos. The forest grows over them, but cannot hide them. Some call it Akakair. Others whisper another name, the city beneath the roots. They say that in the beginning, before the rivers claimed their own directions, the land here was not jungle but garden. A vast living cathedral where the air shimmered like glass. The people who lived there did not build on the earth, but with it. Their temples rose and sank at once, as though grown from the soil like vines that wished to return home. And when they disappeared, they left behind no broken walls or crumbling statues, only a pulse in the ground, a heartbeat that hums through the roots of trees when the rain falls slow and heavy. Some believe the first hint of the city came from the air itself. In the late 20th century, long after the conquistadors' golden dreams had faded, satellite eyes gazed down upon the Amazon and saw what no man could see from the floor of the forest. Perfectly straight lines beneath the canopy, geometric patterns, circles, plazas, avenues. They were called geoglyphs, and there were hundreds of them. Some spanned the length of cathedrals, drawn centuries before any known civilization had mapped the land. Archaeologists would later dig and find shards of pottery, traces of charcoal, fragments of soil once tilled by human hands. Proof, perhaps, that the forest was not always wild, that beneath the roots lies a memory of cultivation, of life, of quiet design. But science is only one language, and the Amazon speaks another. Shamans in distant villages still tell stories that have no beginning. They speak of the people of the lighted clay, who walked between trees taller than towers, whose breath could stir the leaves and call the rain. It is said their temples were alive, that each stone pulsed faintly in rhythm with the stars. Their wisdom was not written in scrolls or carved upon stone, but sung into the roots of trees, so that even when they vanished, the earth itself would remember. There are those who claim to have found strange echoes, tunnels lined with smooth clay, curved like ribs of a great creature long dead. When their torches touched the walls, the surface shimmered faintly, as if holding light trapped within. Some say it was a trick of moisture. Others swear it was the breath of the sleeping city. And sometimes, as one walks deep in the forest at dusk, when the cicadas soften and the rain retreats, one hears a hollow resonance beneath the feet, a whispering vibration that does not belong to the living forest, but to something older. Beneath the silence, the jungle remembers what it buried. For thousands of years, the Amazon has hidden more than it has revealed. Explorers like Percy Fawcett, driven by myth and obsession, vanished into this green labyrinth in search of a city he called Z. He spoke of great causeways buried under roots, of temples whose tops brushed the canopies. He never returned. Yet, decades later, satellite images and drone footage began to reveal faint traces of vast, ordered structures, patterns that mirrored his words. Was Fawcett a dreamer, or did he glimpse the breath of something real before the forest swallowed him whole? Whispers tell us that beneath the riverbeds lie carvings of celestial patterns, spirals and stars etched into stone that has not seen daylight for centuries. These markings resemble those found in distant lands, on the walls of the Andes, and even on the stones of the Yucatan, as though a forgotten network once spanned the entire continent, connecting those who spoke to the stars in silence. Perhaps these people understood something we no longer do, that to build upon the earth is to harm it, but to build within it is to belong. Perhaps it is the wind, or perhaps it is memory, the land remembering the footsteps of those who walked before. For the serpent never died. It is movement itself. It coils in rivers, in clouds, in the double helix of our own being. It breathes in the lightning, it sleeps in the soil. And when we look to the sky and trace the curve of the Milky Way, it watches back, the same pattern, written in light and stone. Maybe that is what the builders meant to tell us, that the road to the stars is not above us, but beneath our feet, that every step upon the earth is a step upon the sky road. And when we are quiet enough, As night falls, the forest exhales. The air thickens with scent. Wet bark, moss, the faint sweetness of decay. The trees seem to lean closer, their roots coiling in patterns that look almost deliberate. Fireflies gather, drifting through the undergrowth like small souls searching for home. And in that dim glow, one might imagine the city returning for a moment. Terraces rising where vines now crawl, clay walls gleaming with captured moonlight, the faint music of water echoing through corridors of green. When the world has gone still and the heart beats slow as sand, we can almost hear it, the sound of the serpent turning once more in its sleep, reminding us that the journey between worlds is never far, only forgotten. It is said that in the high valleys of the Andes, where dawn climbs slowly over mountains veiled in silver mist, there stands a temple that once held the sun itself, a place of quiet reverence, carved from golden stone that still catches the light long after sunset. The people called it Intihuasi, the House of the Sun. And though centuries have passed, the air around it still feels awake, as if the stone remembers warmth that never quite faded. When travelers first climb the slopes above the ancient city of Cusco, they see the remains of that temple, a curved wall of enormous blocks, each cut with impossible precision, fitted so tightly together that no blade of grass can slip between them. It is said that when the moon is full and the rivers run high, the jungle hums differently. The frogs grow silent. The air trembles with an invisible song. Some say it is the voice of the city, calling to its own. A low, pulsing rhythm felt rather than heard. The tribes who still live near the geoglyphs light small fires then, not in fear, but in respect. They offer smoke to the roots, whispering to the unseen builders beneath. To them, the city never vanished. It simply sank into the deeper layers of the world, waiting for the right silence to rise again. This is what remains of the Coricancha, the golden enclosure, once the most sacred site in the Inca world. But in the stories told by the Quechua elders, the Coricancha was only one reflection of something older, a greater temple now lost to time, known in whispers as the Temple of the Sleeping Sun. They say it lies hidden beneath the ground, buried under centuries of earth and memory, somewhere between the ruins of Cusco and the sacred peaks of Ozangate. It was here, long before the empire, that the first keepers of light gathered. They were not priests in the way we understand, but guardians, chosen to keep the balance between the sleeping sun below and the waking sun above. For the ancients believed that the sun did not rise each morning of its own accord. It was called forth, summoned by chant, by breath, by the warmth stored deep within the mountain's heart. At dusk, when the air grew cold and the shadows lengthened across the terraces, the keepers would descend into the chamber, a vast, circular hall carved directly into the bedrock. Its ceiling was lined with mirrors of polished pyrite and obsidian, arranged to catch the final light of the setting sun and scatter it across the walls. The effect, it is said, was like standing inside a living star. Archaeologists dig and write papers. Satellites draw maps. Yet for every trench uncovered, the jungle grows 100 more secrets. The deeper one goes, the more the forest feels sentient, protective, almost jealous of what it holds. In certain clearings, where the air feels too still, explorers report a strange sensation, as if they are being watched by the ground itself. It is not menace but memory, the earth remembering the weight of feet that once walked in reverence. And when the last ray disappeared, they would kneel in silence, hands over their hearts, whispering to the hidden sun below. It was a ritual of gratitude, a promise that light would return. Modern archaeologists have found echoes of these beliefs across the Andes. At sites like Machu Picchu, Ollantaytambo, and Sacsayhuaman, ancient builders aligned temples and stones with the movements of the sun, the June and December solstices, the equinoxes, the longest and shortest days of the year. They knew how to catch sunlight on a single stone at dawn, or channel it through narrow windows to mark the passage of seasons. Their architecture was not just functional. It was spiritual geometry, a dialogue between stone and star. The temple of the sleeping sun may never have existed in one place. It may have been an idea, the belief that light itself could sleep, that the sun's spirit rested beneath the mountains through the night. In Inca cosmology, everything lived in cycles. Birth, death, rebirth, day, night, dawn. When the sun disappeared beyond the horizon, it did not vanish. It simply journeyed into the underworld, traveling through Uku Pasha, the hidden realm of seeds, roots, and dreams. Somewhere under that green ocean lies the truth. There it was tended by the ancestors, nourished until it could rise again. Thus the people did not fear darkness. They honored it, for they understood that even the sun must rest. Some explorers claim to have found tunnels beneath Cusco that could stretch for miles, corridors carved so precisely that their walls still shine with the marks of ancient tools. Legends say these tunnels once connected the Coricancha to distant temples, perhaps even to Lake Titicaca, where the first dawn of the world was born. Inside them, they say, lies a great sealed door, a smooth slab of stone bearing the faint outline of a sunburst. Local lore calls it Puerta del Sol Dormido, the door of the sleeping sun. It has never been opened. Those who have stood before it speak of a strange heat that seems to pulse from within, even in the cold mountain air. Beneath the silence, the mountains keep their secrets. Perhaps it is no single city, but thousands. A network of settlements, gardens, and temples intertwined like the roots above them. Recent discoveries suggest millions may have lived there once, tending crops, building plazas, tracing the stars in mirrored pools. A civilization vast and complex, erased not by conquest, but by time and forest. Nature, with her soft patience, rewrote their story in leaves and vines. The Inca believed their peaks, the Apis, were living spirits watching over valleys and rivers. When the Spaniards arrived and tore the gold from the temples, they could not strip the light from the stone. Even after the gilded walls were melted and the statues broken, the people continued to make offerings of corn, flowers, and coca leaves to the rising sun. For to them, the true temple was never made of gold. It was built from rhythm, the endless cycle of darkness yielding to light. It is said that the priests of the temple could tell time not by shadow, but by sound. At dawn, they would stand within the inner chamber and strike a single tone from a hollow stone bowl. The echo would rise, tremble, and then fade. The length of that fading told them when the first light would crest the horizon. When the echo shortened, they knew the sun was near. When it stretched endlessly, they whispered that the sun had gone deeper into dream. In one legend, told still in the mountain villages near Pisac, a young priest once broke the ritual. Yet the memory lingers. He tried to summon the sun too early, striking the bowl before the mountain had awakened. The sound did not return. It sank, swallowed by the earth, leaving the chamber in silence. The priest, in fear, placed his hand upon the stone wall, and it burned beneath his palm, a warmth so deep it felt like breath. He fell to his knees, and from the shadows he heard a voice, not in words, but in feeling. All things rise in their time, even light must rest. When he emerged from the temple, his hair had turned white. Archaeologists have discovered traces of mineral discoloration in several ancient temples, evidence of heat or energy release, though no fire ever burned there. Some scientists suggest it came from the reflection of concentrated sunlight through polished mirrors, used in rituals that drew light deep into the chambers. Perhaps, in their way, the ancients were conducting an early form of solar science, harnessing energy not to control but to honor it. As night falls over the Andes, the sky deepens into indigo. Even the birds seem to sing it, their calls rising and falling like forgotten chants. Rain drips from branch to branch, steady as breath, like the ticking of an ancient clock. Somewhere far below, water moves through hidden passages, tracing the same routes that people once walked. And as the listener drifts closer to sleep, the sound of that unseen river feels almost human. A language without words, a lullaby from the deep earth. The stars appear one by one, clear, close, shimmering like sparks from the same divine hearth. In the villages below, fires flicker in clay lamps. Children are told that each flame is a messenger of the sleeping sun, keeping vigil until dawn. It is said that when you watch the sunrise from the ruins of Coricancha, the first ray of light touches the curved wall as though seeking its reflection, like a memory returning home. Perhaps the temple of the sleeping sun was never lost, because it was never only stone. Perhaps it was always meant to be within us. That small, glowing warmth that rises each morning when the world opens its eyes. We, too, hold a sleeping sun inside our chest, a heart that beats in rhythm with the dawn. And when we rest, when we close our eyes, we do not vanish. We descend into the same sacred cycle, from light into silence, from silence into light. Some nights, when the wind moves gently through the valleys, the stones of Cusco shimmer faintly, as if remembering gold. And though centuries have passed since the last chant echoed in the temple, the air still carries that warmth, that promise whispered through generations. It is said that when the first light touches the canopy at dawn, the city stirs, not in form, but in spirit. The mist becomes architecture. The shafts of sunlight, pillars. The songs of insects, a cathedral choir. For a fleeting moment, the jungle and the city are one, as they always were. Builders and vines, memory and moss, all woven into a single dream that breathes beneath the roots. The sun will return. It always does. So close your eyes and imagine that hidden chamber beneath the mountain. The mirrors still gleam softly in the dark. Somewhere, a bowl of stone still waits to sing. And in that deep quiet, before dream, before dawn, you can almost feel it. The breath of the sleeping sun, pulsing gently through the heart of the earth, waiting, as it always has, for morning. It is said that across the spines of the Andes, where mountains touch the breath of the sky, there runs a road that was not made by hands, but by the wind itself. It winds through mist and shadow, climbs through peaks where clouds drift like silent pilgrims, and vanishes again into the horizon. Perhaps the city was never meant to be found. Perhaps it is not a place, but an idea, a reminder that civilizations do not vanish, they transform. That what we call ruins are simply another shape of life. Beneath our own cities, beneath our noise and hunger, the same quiet rhythm endures, the one that hums in the soil, in the pulse of roots, in the hidden breath of the world. Some call it Capac Nan, the great Inca road. But in the villages where the old tongue still lives, it is known more softly, the lost road of the clouds. The Incas called their empire Tontinsuyu the land of four quarters. To hold such a vast realm together, they built roads that stretched for more than 25,000 miles, from the deserts of Chile to the jungles of Colombia. These were not roads of dust or wagon, but of purpose. Stone paths carved into mountainsides, suspended over canyons by bridges of woven grass. They carried runners, messages, and dreams. And though centuries have passed, some still cling to the cliffs, their stones slick with moss and memory. It is said the road itself was alive, that when the first Inca kings walked its length, they did not simply travel, they communed. Each step echoed like prayer, and so we listen. Each breath rose to meet the condors above. The road was their spine, their lifeline, their song. And even now, in the high passes near Cusco and Quito, one can stand upon its remnants and feel that same pulse, the rhythm of an empire that understood movement as devotion. To walk these paths is to move through layers of time. One moment you pass through terraced valleys where maize still grows in the ancient pattern. The next you climb into clouds so thick you cannot see the next step. The air thins. The world grows quiet. The mountains seem to breathe with you. And suddenly, in that silence, you sense the presence of thousands who once walked here. Farmers, warriors, messengers carrying shells from the sea to temples built for the sky. In the days of the Inca, relay runners known as chasquis carried messages along the Capac Nan. To the rain falling through leaves, they were trained from childhood, living at way stations spaced every few miles. When one grew tired, another took his place, passing the message like a spark of breath. It is said that the words of the Sapa Inca, the divine ruler, could travel hundreds of miles in a single day, from Cusco to the coast, from temple to temple, carried entirely by the rhythm of running feet. Even now, villagers tell stories of ghostly chasquis who still run the mountains at dusk, their silhouettes flickering in the mist, their bare feet silent upon the stone. But the road was not only for men, it was for gods. It was for spirits and the wind. Many of its paths align with sacred peaks, Apis, the mountain deities of the Andes. Each summit was a guardian, and the road between them a thread of prayer connecting one protector to another. To walk it was to weave the earth together, to the hush between two heartbeats. To maintain it was to keep balance between realms. Modern archaeologists have traced sections of the Capac that reach impossible places. Ledges no wider than a man's shoulders. Tunnels carved through solid rock, stairways vanishing into valleys. Some are so high they seem to touch the stars. Others plunge deep into jungle, swallowed by vines and silence. The network was not just infrastructure, it was architecture of devotion, an act of faith rendered in stone. In Bolivia, near the shores of Lake Titicaca, one can still see the faint lines of these roads etched into the plains, straight as light. Some connect directly to temples like Tiwanaku, others to forgotten settlements that have no name. When seen from the air, the paths form strange geometries, spirals, crosses, and rays, as though they were designed not merely for walking, but for watching. Some researchers believe they were aligned with celestial events. Solstices, lunar cycles, the rising of Venus. If so, then the Incas built not just a road across land, but a reflection of the cosmos, a map where heaven and earth were joined by footsteps. To the earth murmuring in her sleep. It is said the clouds themselves once followed the road. On certain days, when the sun warmed the peaks and mist began to rise from the valleys, the vapor would gather along the path, curling and flowing as if retracing invisible lines. The shepherds watched this in silence, believing the road was showing itself to the sky, reminding the gods that it still lived. There is a story told in the village of Ollantaytambo about a traveler who tried to follow the road to its end. He walked for days, climbing higher and higher until the air turned to ice and his breath became smoke. One night, as he camped near a ridge above the Urubamba Valley, a storm rolled in. The wind howled like flutes. When dawn came, he found the road had changed. The stones no longer led downward but seemed to fade into cloud, forming a bridge of mist that reached toward the horizon. He hesitated, then stepped forward, and felt no ground beneath his feet. He did not fall, because somewhere underfoot, beneath the emerald labyrinth, beneath centuries of silence, the city still dreams, patient, eternal, untouched by time. It waits not to be discovered, but to be remembered. He simply continued walking, vanishing into the clouds. Some say he was chosen by the mountain. Others say he became part of the road itself. Today, fragments of that great network still lie hidden under centuries of moss and rain. Farmers in remote regions often find old stones beneath their fields, narrow tracks that lead nowhere, but feel deliberate. In 2014, UNESCO declared the Capac a World Heritage Site, recognizing it not only as an engineering marvel, but as a living thread of culture. Yet even so, much remains undiscovered, lost beneath landslides, rivers, and memory. The Incas had no written language, so the road itself was their script. Each step a word, each bend a sentence. And perhaps, tonight, as you drift toward your own dream, you will hear it. That low, sacred hum from far below, like the breath of the world itself, whispering, "I am still here." Each mountain pass a prayer. Some anthropologists believe the road was also symbolic, a mirror of the Milky Way, which the Incas called Mayu, the celestial river. Just as the stars formed a shining path across the sky, the Capac stretched across the continent, connecting sacred sites aligned with constellations. To walk it, they believed, was to follow the journey of souls through the heavens, from birth to return, from light to light. And perhaps that is why the road endures, even in ruin, because it was never meant only for travelers of flesh, but for those of spirit, for ancestors, for dreams, for the winds that move unseen. When dusk falls upon the high Andes, the clouds descend low, and the mountains seem to breathe mist into the valleys. The old road gleams faintly, its stones dark with moisture. In the distance, thunder murmurs, slow, heavy, ancient. If you listen closely, between the rain and the echoes, You might hear the rhythm of running feet, the ghost of a chasqui passing by, still carrying a message that has no end. I have always been here. Perhaps that is the meaning of the lost roads of the clouds, that some paths are not meant to arrive anywhere. They exist so that we may walk, remember, and listen. For roads, too, can dream. They dream of movement, of connection, of stories whispered across the spine of the world. And when the last traveler sleeps, when no human feet remain to stir the dust, the wind takes their place, tracing the old routes step by step through the thin air. It is said that at sunrise, when the clouds lift and the light returns, the mountains gleam like silver serpents. Each ridge, each shadow, looks like a road unfolding toward the horizon. Perhaps those are the same roads, rebuilt each morning by the sky itself, so the world will never forget how to find its way home. Beneath the roots. So rest now, wanderer. The road still exists, just beyond the mist. It waits in silence, patient and eternal. And as you drift toward sleep, remember, you too walk the lost roads of the clouds, each breath a step upon an invisible path that leads always toward the light. It is said that in a red desert where the wind moves like an old prayer, there is a wall of stone that listens, not with ears, but with light. At a certain hour on a certain day, a blade of sun slips through the rock and touches a carved spiral, and the whole desert seems to hold its breath. It is said that long before the Maya carved their cities from limestone, and long before the Aztec priests raised their altars to the sun, another people watched the heavens from the heart of the earth. They built not monuments of worship, but instruments of alignment, vast pyramids of clay and stone that faced not the sunrise, but the breath of the stars themselves. Those who have seen it speak softly afterward, as if they had entered a room where something ancient still sleeps. They call it an oracle, for it answers without words. The elders say it does not foretell, it remembers. In forgotten corners of the earth, we find these places where time is not measured by clocks, but by the slow turning of the sky. Here, in the high desert of the American Southwest, the stones blush with iron, the mesas stand like altars, and the air is thin enough to carry whispers from 1,000 years ago. Beneath the silence, a people once raised great houses of sandstone and timber, aligned their doorways to the solstice dawn, and traced the path of the moon across generations. To the world, this place is called Chaco Canyon. To those who still listen, it is a chamber of echoes, marked by the moon. Whispers tell us the canyon was a center of pilgrimage, a heart of the world for the ancestors we call ancestral Puebloans. Between the 9th and 12th centuries, they built structures of remarkable precision. Multi-storied great houses like Pueblo Bonito and Chetro Kettle. Rooms arranged with intention, kivas sunk into the earth like circular breaths. Far to the north of the Amazon, near the plains that would one day cradle Teotihuacan, an ancient structure once rose in silence. This name is lost, but some call it the pyramid that faced the stars. The story begins at dusk, when the sky bleeds into violet and the air hums with the sound of unseen wings. Travelers crossing the plateau would see it, a shape too deliberate to be a mountain, too alive to be mere ruin. It stood slightly askew from the horizon, as if turning its gaze not to the sun but toward some celestial point that no longer exists. Their roads, straight as starlight, run across the desert with ceremonial purpose, some pointing toward distant mountains, others toward the rising place of the sun. Archaeologists speak of alignments. Windows that catch dawn on the shortest day, doorways that frame sunset on the longest. This is factual, and yet facts become softer here, as if wrapped in sage smoke and dusk. On a lonely butte above the canyon, there is, or was, a stone face etched with spirals. In 1977, a researcher named Anna Sofar climbed that ridge and watched as 3 slabs of sandstone cast narrow beams of light across a spiral petroglyph. At solar noon on the summer solstice, a single dagger of sun bisected the spiral's heart. On the winter solstice, twin daggers framed it like careful hands. Near equinox, light hovered at its edge, balanced between seasons. It became known as the sun dagger, and for many, it felt like a revelation. the sky and the stones speaking to one another in a language of shadow and blade. Years later, the rock shifted, as deserts do, and the effect grew uncertain, fragile. Archaeologists have long puzzled over such alignments. Across the ancient Americas, from the great mounds of Cahokia to the pyramids of Caral in Peru, sacred architecture seems drawn to the sky. At Teotihuacan, the Pyramid of the Moon mirrors the shape of the mountain behind it. At Chichen Itza, light carves a serpent down its steps at equinox. Yet there are older, quieter pyramids, made of mud and fired earth, whose foundations trace not the course of the sun, but the wandering path of stars like Orion, Pleiades, and the dark rift of the Milky Way. The site was closed, protected, left to its own breath. But the knowledge remains, glimmering like mica in red dust. At least once, the desert focused the sun into a sign, and the sign was a spiral. Spirals are not rare on these walls. They curl beside deer and dancers, beside hands with long, elegant fingers, beside figures whose heads shine like halos of radiating lines. Some spirals are paired, some small, some great and careful. Many elders say, mark water. Others, the path of the sun. Some, the long cycle of the moon, the 18.6-year swing called the lunar standstill, when the moon climbs to its highest and lowest points on the horizon, then returns. In this canyon, scholars have found petroglyphs and alignments that seem to notice that lunar rhythm. A patience beyond one lifetime, a memory left for grandchildren's grandchildren. To carve a moon that takes nearly 19 years to reveal its full pattern is to trust the future with your breath. It is said these builders knew the heavens as one might know a pulse, not through mathematics, but through reverence. The night sky was a living map, and their pyramids were its earthly echoes. Each level, each terrace, each stone corresponded to a constellation, a story, a season. To them, the stars were not distant. They were kin. It is said the oracle was not one place but many. A window cut to cradle the first light of winter. A doorway where the equinox enters like a guest. A spiral waiting at the right angle of noon. The desert is full of such rooms. They are quiet, stripped, free of clutter, because what enters them is not a ritual object but the sky itself. Here, ceremony is alignment, and devotion is accuracy. To wait for a single beam at a single moment is to learn a sacred patience. In the red hush of evening, the desert changes color. Shadows lengthen along sandstone like brushstrokes in soot and rose. Local legends in the highlands of Mexico speak of the Star Watchers, a people who vanished before the rise of known civilizations. They built their temples with mirrors of polished obsidian, said to reflect both sky and soul. When they gazed into them, the stars above seemed to move in answer. Some say they believed the world began not with fire, but with reflection, that the universe itself was born from a single mirror turned inward. Wind carries the scent of juniper, dust, and old rain. You climb toward a panel of petroglyphs and your footsteps leave no mark. They are taken in by the land. On the wall, two spirals, one large, one small. Between them, a thin path of empty stone. At sunset, that path fills with light, a breath of gold that connects the two before fading. Perhaps it is only chance. Perhaps it is a message that once answered a question we have forgotten how to ask. Beneath the silence, the canyon holds its schools. In the great houses, rooms are small and rhythmic, doorways stacked like vertebrae. Some aligned to cardinal directions, some to points on the horizon where the sun pauses in its yearly pilgrimage. And so, their pyramids became mirrors too. Archaeologists have found lines scratched in mortar, pecked marks on walls, quiet guides for builders who worked with a compass made of sky. No iron, no glass, no clock, and yet the stones know where to look. When dawn strikes a lintel just so, a room fills with a pale, sacred glow. When dusk lays a bar of shadow on a kiva floor, the year turns. This is not myth. This is the architecture of breath. It is said the people carried memory in prayer sticks and feathered wands, in songs that walk the horizon. They carried it in corn, blue, red, white, in water stored carefully against a land that withholds and then blesses. Some seasons were generous, others silent. There were droughts that lingered like a held note, winds that scoured villages clean, migrations written in footpaths that vanish and reappear like mirage. By the 13th century, many of the great houses were empty, the canyon growing quiet except for ravens and the steady voice of the wind. At night, the topmost platform caught the starlight like water. Priests, or perhaps astronomers, stood in silence as the constellations wheeled overhead. They marked no time as we do, but cycles, the slow breath of the cosmos. The appearance of a single star might foretell rain, or the migration of sacred birds, or the return of a vanished god. The pyramid, then, was not simply a monument, but a conversation between the earth and the eternal. But to say they abandoned this place is to miss its language. The people moved as people do. The land kept their echoes. The oracle stayed where it had always been, in light, in stone, in the turning of the sky. Across the wider desert, the red country continues. Canyons open like books. Elsewhere, a rock called newspaper bears 1,000 figures layered across centuries. Hunters, spirals, riders on antlered dreams. Far to the south, beyond mountains and salt flats, another red desert holds its own oracles. Geoglyphs on slopes above the Atacama, colossal figures etched into gravel. A giant with a square head, lines that may measure the coming of rain, the path of a star, a season's breath. Different tongues, same grammar. Earth speaking with light, stone conversing with the sky. Some believe the oracle is not a thing but a practice, a way of standing still long enough for the world to align inside you. Modern science has found faint traces of this conversation. Near the ruins of La Venta and San Lorenzo, once centers of the Olmec, the mother culture of Mesoamerica, archaeologists discovered that many ceremonial platforms align precisely with celestial events. Some face the setting of the brightest star in the night sky, Sirius. Others with the rising of Venus, long considered a messenger between worlds. And deeper still, carved onto stone altars, are serpents coiled with stars, their bodies winding in spirals that match the path of the Milky Way across the ancient sky. A way of noticing where the first ray falls on the shortest day, of knowing which crack of stone will admit dawn like a guest at the proper time. It is patience married to attention, devotion braided with observation. This is how farmers listen to clouds, sailors to currents, elders to children, by watching until the pattern rises from the dust. The canyon teaches slowness. You sit in the red shade and wait. A lizard makes its quiet way along a split in the rock. Far off, thunder rolls as if someone is moving furniture in the sky. A hawk writes a slow circle above a ruin that has no roof and needs none. When the sun lowers, a bright blade appears across the spiral, thin, exact, a seam between worlds. It lasts for the length of a held breath and then softens, widens, dissolves. Perhaps the pyramid in our story stood among them, older than record, built by hands that saw time not as a line, but a circle of returning light. The stone returns to shadow. You exhale as if you had been speaking, though you said nothing at all. Light factual grounding murmurs beneath the poetry. Chaco's fluorescence between about 850 and 1150 of our common era. Great houses with hundreds of rooms, kivas aligned to horizons, outlying communities linked by roads that ignore terrain. The sun dagger observed in our own time, its solstitial performance a marriage of rock and sky, the subtle, nearly 19-year rhythm of the moon inscribed in stone and story. These are not claims of wonder alone. They are measurements, observations, the slow arithmetic of seasons. And yet no measurement explains the feeling when the desert becomes a lens and the sun writes a line upon a spiral you cannot read and cannot forget. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. Perhaps the oracle has answered every question we brought to it with the same gesture. A beam at a certain hour, a shadow at a certain mark, a balance at the edge of equal night and day. Perhaps the questions change, and the answer stays. Where memory fades, the spiral remains. A path that returns to itself, a reminder that endings are only curves turning toward beginnings. There is one tale, found among the Nawa oral traditions, of a priest who spoke to the stars each night from the summit of a great pyramid. He called them by names now forgotten, those who remember, the ones who fell first, the fire that sleeps. He believed the stars were not just suns, but ancestors who once walked the earth. When the world grew heavy with noise, they ascended into the heavens, leaving the pyramid as their final bridge between sky and soil. It is said that on the longest night, elders still keep vigil. They sit near a wall that remembers, sharing warm breath in cold air, waiting for the first pale seam of day. They do not ask for spectacle. They ask for balance, for the sun to find its place again, for the moon to keep her long promise, for the year to step softly into its next circle. When the light arrives, it does not shout. It lays a quiet hand upon the stone, and the stone answers with silence, which is the oldest language of all. So close your eyes now. Let the red desert drift behind your lids. Mesas steeped in dusk, petroglyphs like constellations pressed into sandstone. A spiral waiting for its blade of light. Somewhere far away, thunder rolls. Closer, a dry riverbed breathes dust. And at the edge of a butte, within a narrow seam of rock, the oracle wakes for a moment, receives the sun and closes again. One night, when the stars dimmed, perhaps from smoke, perhaps from sorrow, the priest stood upon the platform and whispered his final prayer. The people below watched as the heavens shimmered, and the stars slowly shifted. The pyramid glowed faintly, as if exhaling. By morning, both the priest and the top of the structure were gone, leaving only a hollow where light had once gathered. Perhaps it was never meant to be found. Perhaps it was always meant to be felt. A thin line of warmth in the cool of morning, a memory of light beneath the skin. For what is an oracle, if not a place where the world aligns long enough for us to remember that we, too, are marked by the moon, we too are carved by time, we too carry a spiral inside us, and every breath we take is a small, celestial answer. It is said that in the dry earth of northern Peru, beneath the shade of tall carob trees and whispering dunes, a mask once slept, gleaming faintly through centuries of soil and silence. When it was uncovered, it seemed to sigh. Its eyes were empty, its mouth still and solemn, yet upon its golden cheeks ran delicate lines, channels that caught the light like tears. Those who first saw it did not know whether to call it beautiful or sorrowful. They simply called it the mask that wept in gold. Today, under the gaze of modern satellites, faint geometries still reveal themselves across those same planes. Patterns invisible to the eye but seen from the sky. Lines that converge not on the sun's path, but upon the ghostly tracks of vanished stars, whose positions match those from over 4,000 years ago. It is as if someone, long before telescopes, had written an invisible message to the cosmos. We see you. Gold was the breath of gods to the Andean world. To the people of ancient Sipin, Lambayeque, and Moche, it was never currency. It was sunlight made solid, a bridge between the heavens and the living. To hold it was to hold the warmth of the sun itself. And yet the mask that emerged from the tomb of Sipin did not shine with triumph. It shimmered with grief. The story begins in the Waka Rajeda, near the dusty town of Lambayeque, where in 1987, archaeologists uncovered a royal burial that stunned the world. Deep within an adobe pyramid lay the tomb of a ruler, now known as the Lord of Sipin, a man entombed more than 1,700 years ago, surrounded by gold, turquoise, and the bones of those who followed him into eternity. He wore a headdress of feathers, a necklace of golden peanuts, half in gold, half in silver, symbolizing the balance between life and death, day and night. Across his face rested a mask, oval, radiant, and impossibly human. Its expression was neither joyous nor still. It was caught between worlds. At night, when one stands among those ancient mounds, the air feels strangely attentive. The ground beneath seems to hum, as though remembering the vibration of long-forgotten chants. Even the wind moves differently, circling rather than crossing, whispering through the grass in patterns too rhythmic to be random. The stars above look familiar, yet not quite the same, slightly displaced, like words in an ancient language almost understood. Some said the faint grooves beneath its eyes were symbolic, channels for tears, a reminder that even kings must mourn. Others said they were simply design. But in the quiet of that chamber, where dust glittered in the archaeologists' lamps like suspended stars, it was difficult not to feel the weight of sadness. The Moche people who forged this mask lived long before the Inca. They built their temples from mud and sun, painted their walls with scenes of ceremony and sacrifice. Their artisans worked with metals as if coaxing breath from stone, hammering, annealing, and polishing without machines, shaping faces that seemed alive. Gold, to them, was sacred flesh, not for wealth but for communication with the divine. When a ruler died, his body became a vessel through which the sun would speak. The mask, therefore, was not decoration. It was a veil between the worlds, a final translation of light into silence. It is said that each mask was hammered to match the soul of its wearer. Some explorers say that if you stand on one of these silent terraces and close your eyes, you will feel a faint pressure between your brows, as if the air itself is leaning forward to meet you. They call it the breath of alignment. Perhaps it is simply imagination, or perhaps the stones are still tuned to the stars, still humming to a frequency that has not faded with time. No two were the same. Some were serene, others fierce, and a few, like this one, carried an expression almost tender. Perhaps the artist, working by firelight, saw something in the ruler's face that could not be forgotten. A hint of weariness beneath the grandeur, a trace of knowing that even gold cannot outlast sorrow. Archaeologists later found dozens of similar funerary masks across the Peruvian coast. From the Lambayeque and Sican cultures to the Chimu and Inca, some were inlaid with lapis, others with shell, others cast in copper that once gleamed red as sunrise. But none were quite like the mask of Sipin. Its tears made it human. Whispers tell us that the tears were not grief, but renewal. In Moche art, water and blood were intertwined, symbols of sacrifice and fertility, both necessary for life. The tears may have represented the eternal cycle of giving and receiving, the rain that must fall, the blood that must return to earth, the endless exchange between gods and men. In the highlands of Peru, at Caral, one of the world's oldest known cities, older even than Egypt's first pyramids, archaeologists found musical instruments carved from bones and shells buried beside sacred mounds. They believe the music was part of astronomical ceremony, used to mirror the pulse of the heavens. Even the architecture followed a rhythm, a spiral layout reflecting the motion of planets. Across a continent, the same impulse echoes, the need to shape Earth in the likeness of sky. To weep was not weakness. It was participation in creation. Beneath the silence, the mask becomes a mirror. When one gazes upon it today in the Museum of Lambayeque, the polished surface reflects faintly, not enough to see your face clearly, only enough to remind you that you exist within its gaze. The gold hums softly under the lights. The lines that seem to weep catch every flicker, every breath of movement. It feels less like an object and more like a memory, as though the mask remembers its wearer, and the wearer remembers the sun. In the old beliefs of the Andes, the soul did not vanish with death. It passed through three realms: the underworld of roots, the world of the living, and the upper world of light. Masks accompanied that journey, protecting the spirit as it shed one form for another. To cover a face was not to hide it, but to preserve it, to ensure that when the sun rose again, the person beneath would rise too. Perhaps the pyramid that faced the stars was never meant to outlast its builders. Perhaps its purpose was not endurance, but alignment. To exist for a brief time when earth, star, and spirit shared the same breath. And when that alignment passed, the pyramid, like a candle after prayer, simply dimmed. Some of these masks were buried with warriors, others with priests, others still with unknown people whose graves faced east, toward dawn. In one tomb near Baton Grande, archaeologists found a mask placed not over a body, but beside it, as if it waited for someone yet to return. The gold was dull, blackened by centuries of soil, but when cleaned, its glow returned instantly, like a heartbeat remembering its rhythm. That, perhaps, is the secret of gold. It does not die, it only sleeps. There are stories among the local people that, on certain nights, when the moon is high over the desert and the wind moves across the dunes. Faint lights appear where tombs lie hidden, soft flickers like candles beneath the sand. The old ones say those are the spirits of the masked, their faces gleaming again for a moment, remembering the warmth of ritual. And sometimes, they say, the desert weeps too, a fine mist rising from the dunes before dawn, like tears returning to the sky. When the Spaniards came, they tore the gold from temples, melted it into bars, erased its meaning. But the land kept its memory. For centuries, farmers plowed up fragments. An earring, a disc, a broken mask, each one gleaming as if it had never known darkness. It is said that on certain nights after heavy rain, the earth still reveals its outline. Farmers working the land report seeing faint ridges glowing pale under moonlight, straight lines that vanish by dawn. Some dismiss it as erosion, but the locals call it the shadow of the pyramid. They leave offerings there, corn, feathers, small shards of mirror. They believe the pyramid still listens, and when the stars shift into their ancient places once again, it will rise anew, not from stone, but from reflection. To this day, the soil of northern Peru glitters after rain. Children gather those small flashes and hold them to the light, unaware that they are touching the language of the gods. The mask that wept in gold sits now behind glass, polished and guarded. Visitors walk by quietly, drawn to its eyes. They stand before it as if waiting for it to speak. And perhaps in a way it does. Not in sound, but in reflection, in the way it captures each face for a heartbeat, each fleeting human light. The mask becomes a conversation between past and present, between dust and breath. It is said that once, an elder artisan from the region was invited to see the mask up close. He had worked gold all his life, using the same tools his ancestors had used. A small hammer, a bowl of sand, a steady hand. As the night deepens, the story folds into silence. The stars above flicker like memories caught between breaths. The wind carries a faint rhythm, like the echo of drums from a time beyond recall. When he looked upon the mask, he nodded and whispered, he was ready. When asked what he meant, he smiled faintly and said, "You can tell when a person has finished their brightness. The metal learns their rhythm." Perhaps that is what we are seeing. Not sorrow, not beauty, but rhythm. A pause between light and dark, a moment where gold holds the memory of human breath. Beneath the silence, the story deepens. The Moche civilization, whose art spoke of gods with fanged mouths and men turned into birds, thrived and faded long before history began to write its records. Their irrigation channels still trace the desert floor. Their pyramids, huacas, still stand like broken teeth against the horizon. And inside them, in dark chambers cool as night, lie the faces they left behind, not as ghosts, but as reminders that the divine wears a human expression. It is said that when the morning sun touches the museum's glass and glints upon the mask's cheek, for one instant the tears disappear. And then comes that quiet thought, the one that always lingers after the telling of an old truth. The light fills the hollow eyes, and the face seems to awaken. Not sad, not glad, only aware. Then the light moves on, and the tears return. Perhaps the mask weeps not for the dead, but for the living, for those who forget that even gold must return to dust, and dust to dawn. Perhaps it weeps for us, who look for eternity in metal instead of in silence. But if you stand long enough, and the hum of the room fades, you might sense something else. A warmth beneath your skin, a pulse that answers the mask's quiet glow, as though it were reminding you that the same light runs in your veins, the same ancient shimmer that once rose with the sun over the Andes. And when you close your eyes, you might hear it, the faint sound of a hammer striking gold somewhere deep in the earth, forging another face, another soul. Perhaps the builders did not build for themselves at all, waiting for the day when it will rise again, gleaming, human, eternal. Perhaps it was never a mask at all. Perhaps it was a mirror for the sun. And perhaps the tears were only reflections, the way light bends when it remembers what it once loved. It is said that deep within the green heart of Guatemala, where vines twist like veins of time and the air hums with unseen wings. There lies a forest that remembers every sound ever made within it. A forest where stones still speak, not in words, but in echoes. They repeat the voices of those who once walked among them, priests and kings, astronomers and builders, all swallowed now by moss and silence. The locals call it El Bosque de las Piedras que Cantan, the forest of echoing stones. The world knows it as Tikal. Perhaps they built for us. The first time you see it, it feels unreal. Pyramids rise from the mist like islands breaking through an emerald sea. Ceiba trees, sacred to the Maya, stretch their roots over stairways once meant for gods. Every surface is alive. Moss, orchids, vines, and the soft glow of humidity. When rain falls, it does not fall, it whispers. When thunder rolls, it rolls like memory. And when you stand before the great temples, you feel it. A vibration beneath your feet, subtle, persistent, like the breath of something vast still dreaming beneath the soil. Tikal was one of the greatest cities of the Maya world. For more than 1,000 years, it thrived. A place of astronomy, ceremony, and stone. Its builders measured time not in hours, but in cycles of sun and moon, Venus and eclipse. For the ones who would one day look up at the same stars. They wrote in glyphs, counted in centuries, and raised towers that touched the stars. At its height, tens of thousands lived here. Then the jungle came, and the voices fell quiet. But the stones did not forget. Archaeologists began uncovering Tikal in the 19th century, clearing trees that had grown over temples and plazas. When they first shouted across the main square, their voices returned to them, perfectly doubled, echoing off the limestone in tones clear and eerie. The Maya had known this long before science measured it. They built with sound in mind. Their temples were tuned, each angle, each stairway, each wall designed to carry the human voice upward, outward, into resonance with the heavens. Stand before Temple I, the temple of the great jaguar, and clap your hands. The echo that comes back is not the sound of a clap. And feel the same quiet pull of wonder. It is the chirp of a quetzal, the emerald bird whose feathers were sacred to the gods. No one knows if this was accident or design. Yet the same happens at other Maya sites, Chichen Itza, Palenque, Uxmal. Sound transformed by stone, echo turned to song. Perhaps, as some believe, the architects meant for every ceremony, every prayer to be answered by the earth itself. It is said the priests of Tikal began each dawn with a single note, a conch shell blown from the top of Temple 4, the highest in the city. The sound rippled across the forest like wind over water. From temple to temple, the echoes replied. Even now, in the early hours, when mist covers the ground and the parrots still sleep, you can almost hear it. A low, resonant hum that seems to move through the roots and stones alike. Beneath the silence, Tikal remains alive. For even now, when we lift our eyes to the heavens and trace the paths of constellations older than history, we are speaking their language, the language of alignment, of longing, of light. Hidden tunnels run beneath its plazas. Underground chambers mirror those above. The Maya built this way because they believed in duality. What exists above must exist below. The heavens reflected in the underworld. The temple mirrored by the tomb, life and death breathing in rhythm. In some chambers, archaeologists found bowls arranged like constellations, tiny offerings of jade and obsidian. In others, carvings of serpents twined with stars, the sky written in stone beneath the earth. The echoes, some say, are not merely acoustics. They are voices trapped between worlds, the resonance of ritual, the memory of sound refusing to fade. Modern researchers have studied the acoustics of these temples, measuring frequencies, recording patterns. They found that the main plazas amplify human speech precisely within the range of the human heart, around 60 beats per minute when spoken softly. Coincidence, perhaps, and in that moment of stillness we understand, or perhaps intention, architecture made to slow the breath, to calm the spirit, to bring the body into harmony with the ritual of time. It is said that in the days of the long count calendar, when a great cycle ended and another began, the priests would stand at the temple summits and call to the four directions. The echoes answered from forest and stone, folding upon themselves like waves returning to shore. Those who listened claimed they could hear more than one voice returning, as though the ancestors themselves replied. In one excavation, beneath a temple floor, archaeologists found a cache of flutes carved from the bones of birds. When played, their tone was soft and hollow, like wind through reeds. Tests showed the instruments were tuned to a pentatonic scale, the same intervals that echo naturally among the temple walls. It is as if the music and the stone were one composition, the earth and the people breathing the same note. Whispers tell us that the builders of Tikal chose this place because of its sound. Before laying the first stone, they tested the earth. The pyramid has never truly vanished. They clapped, sang, and listened. Where the forest replied, they built. Where it stayed silent, they moved on. In this way, the city rose not by command, but by conversation, the ground agreeing to bear its weight. The Maya called their temples wits, meaning mountain, and believed each was a living being, crowned by the house of the gods. They fed them with incense, with song, with the breath of flute and drum. To build a temple was to give the world another voice. And when the empire fell silent, those voices did not die. They merely echoed onward, folded into the pulse of the forest. Today, Tikal hums again with quiet footsteps, travelers and scholars, walking the same paths once worn by barefoot priests. They climb the ancient stairs, stand in the wind at the summit, and listen. It remains invisible, eternal. First, they hear nothing. Then, slowly, a rhythm emerges. The flutter of leaves, the call of distant birds, the sigh of the jungle breathing around them. It becomes a kind of music, simple, endless, patient. The sound of a city that still remembers its own heartbeat. There are those who say the echoes carry messages. That if you speak a question into the plaza at twilight, and wait, the returning sound will tell you what you already know but have forgotten. Some scientists explain it as acoustic delay, but the guides smile and shake their heads. They know the forest is older than science. They know that everything that breathes leaves behind an echo. Perhaps the echo is not repetition at all, but response. A bridge of breath between earth and the stars. Perhaps the stones are speaking still, telling us that memory never truly disappears. It only changes shape, softens, folds into air and root and rain. When the rain begins to fall, as it always does in the late afternoon, the sound deepens. Water strikes stone, drops gather in rhythm, and for a moment it feels like the entire forest is drumming softly on behalf of the sky. The echoes swell and fade, like breathing. The air smells of earth and time. Night descends slowly in Tikal. The last light filters through the canopy like melted gold. Fireflies spark between trees, as if the stars themselves have descended to rest among the ruins. The temples grow dark, but not silent. They murmur in frogs, in wind, in the distant flap of wings. It is said that high in the Andes, where the sky drifts so close to the earth it seems to whisper against the mountains, there lies a lake that remembers more than it reveals. Its surface is still, a mirror of cloud and light, but beneath that calm lies the heartbeat of a lost civilization. Locals call it the lake that swallowed a kingdom. The world knows it by another name, Titicaca. Every sound carries, bounces, returns. The forest never allows a word to end. It is said that when you sleep within the shadow of Temple 4, your dreams are louder. You hear voices speaking a language you do not understand, yet somehow remember. You hear drums that might be thunder, footsteps that might be your own. And somewhere in the space between waking and sleep, a low note hums through your bones, steady, eternal, like the heartbeat of the world itself. Perhaps that is what the Maya built. Not monuments to gods, but instruments of memory. Perhaps they shaped sound so that time would never pass in silence. The forest of echoing stones does not speak to those who shout. It speaks to those who listen. At over 12,000 feet above the sea, Lake Titicaca is the highest navigable body of water on Earth. Its waves are slow, deliberate, eternal. Along its shores, time moves differently, Fishermen still carve their reed boats in the same way their ancestors did 1,000 years ago, binding stalks of tatora into narrow vessels that float like fallen moons. From those boats, they tell the same stories their grandfathers whispered, that beneath the silver surface lies a city of light, built when the world was new. And if you listen long enough, past the rustle of trees, past the hum of insects, past even your own pulse, you might hear it too, the soft voice of the past, returning like an echo, reminding you that nothing truly vanishes, that every word, every breath, every act of love or loss, still trembles somewhere in the vast green air. The jungle keeps it all. The stones remember, and the echoes, they wait, patient as stars. Whispers tell us the city was called Wanaku, or sometimes Kalasiu, names that fade like mist, half remembered by the Aymara and Quechua tongues. Its towers were said to have been carved from golden stone, its streets traced in turquoise dust. The people who lived there were children of the sun, born from the union of mountain and water. They built not for conquest, but for harmony. Each temple was aligned with the constellations that rose from the eastern peaks. Each altar mirrored the curve of the lake itself, as if to remind heaven and earth that they shared the same design. For someone quiet enough to hear them again. It is said that there once was a river that flowed the wrong way, not toward the sea, but back toward the heavens. Its surface mirrored the sky so perfectly that those who looked into it could not tell which way was up, which way was down, or which world they truly stood in. Some called it a myth, others a mirror, but to those who lived along its banks, it was sacred, a breathing thread between earth and stars. They called it the river that remembered the sky. The legend lingers along the great waterways of South America, where jungle and time are twins. In the Orinoco, the Amazon, and their secret tributaries that vanish into green silence. It begins, perhaps, with the Orinoco's strange behavior, where for a brief stretch near its source, the current turns against itself, swirling back toward the mountains before joining the Amazon through the hidden channel of the Casiquiare. To explorers, it was a natural wonder. Then, one morning, the earth trembled, the mountains groaned, the sky dimmed. Some say the sun turned its face away in sorrow. The waters rose, silent and slow, and the city disappeared beneath the mirror, swallowed not in violence, but in an immense, sacred quiet. To the elders, it was something deeper, a river that had once been the Milky Way, fallen from the heavens, still longing to return. Beneath the silence, the jungle listens to the river's story. Long before Spanish maps, before even the Maya built their towers, the people of the Orinoco Basin told of a celestial flood. They said the gods once poured a river of stars across the heavens, but one stream slipped and fell, carving its reflection into the earth. Each night, the Milky Way shone above, and its earthly twin shimmered below, both flowing toward the same horizon, one of light, one of water. And so they called their home the land between rivers, not between lands, but between worlds. The river's shape, twisting and meandering like a serpent of glass, reminded them of the cosmic snake anaconda, the first being in their creation myth. It was said the anaconda brought life down from the sky, swimming through the firmament until it reached the earth, where its scales became rivers, its breath became rain, and its body became time itself. To follow the river, then, was to follow the path of creation. Centuries later, when explorers like Alexander von Humboldt journeyed into these lands, they heard the same stories. Even today, divers speak of strange shapes beneath the water. In 2000, an expedition by the Acaqueir Geographical Foundation, guided by Bolivian and Italian researchers, reported the discovery of submerged walls, terraces, and what appeared to be a long ceremonial road stretching hundreds of meters beneath the waves. Sonar images revealed geometric structures, blocks of andesite, and remnants of what could have been temples. The artifacts were dated far older than Inca civilization, perhaps 5,000 years old, perhaps more. But no one could say for certain. The lake keeps its secrets with the patience of eternity. In 1800, Humboldt and his companion Bonpland traced the Orinoco and discovered the mysterious Casiquiare Channel, a natural link between two of the world's greatest river systems. Water flowing from one basin to another, east becoming west, direction becoming illusion. Humboldt wrote that it was as if the earth itself were dreaming of connection. He did not know how close he was to the truth. It is said that at dawn, when mist lies low on the surface, the river becomes indistinguishable from the sky. The clouds drift upon it as though sailing on themselves. Birds skim across its reflection, their wings leaving trails of silver light. Fishermen paddle quietly, and their oars disturb not the water, but the illusion of infinity. Some call this moment el espejo del mundo, the mirror of the world, when heaven and earth are equal. The people who live along the river have kept its ritual of reflection. When the divers surfaced, they brought with them fragments, small carved stones, a ceramic bowl, a single gold ornament shaped like the sun. One of the men swore that while he was below, he heard something faint, not the rush of water, not the hum of his own breath, but a low resonance, as if the stones themselves were murmuring. He said it felt like standing inside the lungs of the world. Before casting their nets, they offer a handful of petals or a few drops of honey to the water, not as superstition but as remembrance to honor what they call the old sky that fell. To them, the river is not simply a body of water. It is an ancestor, an eye, a memory that never closes. Modern science finds its own miracles here. The Amazon and Orinoco basins create half the planet's rain, their vapor rising and falling in a slow exhalation that binds continents. Moisture from their forests travels thousands of miles, feeding clouds that rain on Africa, on Asia, on the very mountains where the first humans once looked up at the stars. Water rises, falls, and returns, the same breath, the same memory. The river truly does remember the sky, not in myth, but in physics. Evaporation, condensation, return. The circle that ancient storytellers already knew, written now in the language of molecules. Yet beyond science, there remains something the instruments cannot measure, the stillness, the sense of endless reflection. Some believe the city beneath Titicaca was the cradle of the Inca. The chroniclers of the Spanish conquest recorded an origin story told by the native priests, that the first Inca, Manco Capac, and his sister Mama Aclo, rose from the waters of the lake at the command of Inti, the sun god. They carried with them the golden staff that would choose the site of their empire. To the Inca, the lake was not water but womb, the birthplace of civilization. And perhaps in that myth lies a memory of something real. The indigenous Piaroa say that each drop of water carries the memory of light. They believe that when lightning strikes, it does not create fire, but releases the sun that sleeps within the rain. And so when they travel by night, they sing to the water, calling out softly so the river remembers its name. In one forgotten tale, there was a shaman who claimed he could see the Milky Way mirrored beneath his canoe. He said that when the two rivers of water and of light flowed in harmony, the world would be balanced. But when men stopped listening to the river's voice, the stars above began to fade. One night, he rowed out alone, guided only by starlight. The next morning, his canoe was found drifting empty, perfectly upright, gliding against the current. The people said the river had finally taken him home. Beneath the silence, the current moves with purpose. Beneath the silence, the lake holds layers of time. Even where it seems still, it flows, slow as breath, sure as time. Every bend, every eddy, every pool holds its own memory. In the deeper channels where sunlight barely touches, there are petroglyphs carved into submerged stones. Spirals, serpents, eyes. Archaeologists have traced them to pre-Columbian cultures thousands of years old. Some align with the constellations, visible in the same season when the river floods. As above, so below, the reflection written in stone. There are places where the river splits into countless paths, labyrinths of green, where each turn opens into another mirror of sky. The water there is black as obsidian, reflecting stars even in daylight. This phenomenon, called agua negra, comes from tannins released by decaying leaves. But to those who live here, it is the breath of the forest, the way the trees give their souls back to the river. Archaeologists have retrieved offerings, ceramic vessels, llama figurines, even human remains, placed carefully into the depths. Some were wrapped in textiles woven with stars, others filled with maize and flowers. These were not sacrifices but messages, prayers sent into the other world through the medium of water. The Incas called the lake Inticoca, the sun's sea, believing its depths were the threshold between worlds. And when night falls, the stars above seem to continue downward forever, an unbroken corridor of light. It is said that some rivers forget their course, drying into sand or vanishing underground. But this one, the river that remembered, forgets nothing. It carries fragments of every place it touches. A leaf from one forest, a grain from one mountain, a whisper from one shore. When rain falls at the mouth of the Amazon, it may contain particles of the Andes, or dust once lifted from the Sahara. Every drop is a traveler, returning to a sky it once knew. Perhaps that is what the ancients meant, that the soul, like water, moves in endless return, that to die is to evaporate, to rise, to become cloud, and to fall again, changed but never lost. The river, in this way, is a teacher. As dusk falls, the water turns to glass. The mountains blush with the last light of day, and the wind drifts down like a sigh. In that quiet hour, it is not difficult to imagine the outlines of vanished streets just below the surface. Colonnades shimmering beneath the ripples, stairways leading down into blue silence. Every small wave seems to reveal and erase them again, like breath fogging a mirror. It does not hurry. It does not hoard. It remembers without clinging, flows without fear. Each reflection is temporary, and yet eternal, for the sky always returns. When the moon rises over the jungle, the water gleams like mercury. Caimans drift like pieces of night. The air vibrates with insects and frogs, a living pulse of darkness. In that vast, breathing silence, you can almost hear the river thinking. A low murmur, a chant older than language. I have seen the stars fall. I have seen them rise again. Perhaps that is why we are drawn to water, not for thirst but for memory. The villagers around Titicaca still leave offerings of coca leaves and cornmeal along the shore. They whisper old names into the wind, names no longer written, but remembered in the rhythm of their language. Some say that when the moon is full, faint bells ring from beneath the waves, as though the drowned city still keeps its rituals. When we look upon a still surface, we see not only the world above, but something of ourselves reflected, the same longing, the same motion, the same quiet return. It is said that at dawn, the river glows with pale fire. The mist lifts, the birds rise, and for a moment the entire world is doubled. Earth below, sky above, both breathing the same light. Fishermen stop their paddling and watch, knowing this is sacred time. The line between heaven and water disappears, and everything, stars, clouds, faces, becomes one reflection. Perhaps the river remembers because we forget. Perhaps it holds the sky because we so often fail to look up. And so it keeps the reflection safe, waiting for the day we will recognize it again. As night falls once more, and the current slips quietly through its mirrored bends, the stars ripple and dissolve. Their light joins the water, and the water joins the air. It is also said that the lake changes color with emotion. When the people grow careless with the land, the water darkens to slate. When they honor the ancestors, it glows a shade of pale turquoise. Scientists will tell you it is the play of light and plankton, the motion of cloud and depth. But to those who live there, it is a sign, the pulse of the buried kingdom, reminding them that nothing sacred ever truly disappears. In that endless exchange, something eternal hums, the oldest sound, the first lullaby of the world. And if you listen carefully, you can hear it even now, the voice of the river that remembers, whispering as it flows, I was the sky once, and I will be the sky again. It is said that in a valley cupped by mountains, where morning mists rise from an old blue lake, there once floated a city like a vision, a place of causeways and quiet water, of gardens that drifted like green rafts beneath the sky. At dawn, her temples gathered light the way lilies gather dew. At night, her canals held the stars in perfect stillness, as if the heavens had come down to rest. They called it the city that dreamed in stone. Stories echo far beyond the Andes. Across the world, in almost every ancient culture, there are tales of cities swallowed by water. Atlantis in the Atlantic, Rungholt in the North Sea, Dvarka on India's coast. All speak of a civilization lost to pride, flood, or divine sorrow. Yet Titicaca's legend is gentler. It speaks not of punishment, but of return. The city beneath the lake, they say, did not die. It simply changed realms, moving from the visible to the invisible, waiting for an age when the world grows quiet enough to see again. The world remembers another name, Tenochtitlan. Whispers tell us the city began with a sign. An eagle, it is said, perched upon a cactus that grew from stone, the bird holding a serpent in its beak. Where memory fades, the tale remains. Build here, the omen said, on the water that remembers the sky. So, on Lake Texcoco, a vast, shimmering mirror at the heart of the Mexican highlands, the Mexica people set down their first woven mats, their first poles, their first quiet prayers. They learned to root the floating earth. They learned to fold water into home. Beneath the silence of those early mornings, men and women laced reeds into rafts and anchored them with willow stakes driven into the soft lake bed. Over them they laid layers of lake mud and lake grass until little islands rose from the water. Chinampas, fields upon the water, feather-light yet immortal. On these emerald pages they wrote their food. Maize and amaranth, chili and squash, flowers thick as breath. Perhaps this is why the place feels dreamlike. Canals curved between gardens like blue veins, and canoes slipped along them without a ripple, guided by poles and patience. It is said that one could cross the city by water as easily as by road, and that the air smelled of wet earth and blossoms, even at midday. Light factual grounding drifts beneath the dream. When the Spaniards first entered the valley in 1519, they wrote of causeways stretching like arms across the lake, of 3 great roads that met the island, of aqueducts bringing cold water from Chapultepec in arched grace, of markets in Tlatelolco where tens of thousands traded in calm, measured rhythm, of a sacred precinct where twin temples rose, aligned to cycles of the sun and the rain. Even their astonishment reads like poetry, for there are moments when truth and wonder are the same word. At the city's heart stood a layered mountain of carved earth, the Templo Mayor, a double pyramid whose steps rose toward 2 sanctuaries. One for Huitzilopochtli, keeper of sun and fire. One for Tlaloc, lord of the hidden waters and the green breath of fields. Here stone remembered seasons. Here the year turned in shadow and light. Archaeologists would one day uncover offerings beneath these stairs. Seashells from far coasts, coral and jade, star-marked knives of obsidian. The bones of birds that fly over waves. Oceanic symbols sleeping in a city of lakes, as if to say, all waters are one. In 1978, beneath the streets of modern Mexico City, workers struck a great round carving. Coyolxauhqui, the moon, her story etched in stone as a turning wheel. Visitors often describe an odd calm upon arrival, as though their heartbeat slows to match the water's rhythm. The air itself feels thinner, touched by reverence. Time loosens its grip. Even the birds glide lower, their reflections merging with their bodies. You can sit by the shore for hours and forget entirely where the world begins or ends. In the years that followed, it was as though the old city exhaled. Chamber after chamber opened, offering after offering rose, the past returning like a tide. It is said the city listened to its own reflection. On certain mornings, when wind forgot to move and the lake lay smooth as obsidian, the temples looked down and found themselves doubled. The people believed that what appears above must have a twin below. The heavens mirrored in water, the temple echoed in the underworld, the living answered by the ancestors. So they built causeways with sluice gates to calm the lake's moods, and dikes to keep the brackish waters at bay. They balanced sweet and salt, sky and shore, stone and reed, a choreography of elements that felt less like engineering than prayer. Beneath the slow light of afternoon, the city softened. Canoes drifted between flower islands. Herons stood motionless like pale commas. Wind carried the scent of copal and ground maize. Messengers crossed causeways on sandaled feet. and the market murmured with measured voices. The city did not shout. It breathed, a measured, lake-born breath, and the breath became custom, and custom became time. When twilight deepens, the first stars emerge, the same constellations the ancient builders once charted in the lake's mirrored surface. The Southern Cross tilts above the horizon, its reflection trembling on the water like a candle's flame. It is easy to imagine priests standing here thousands of years ago, tracing the heavens across the ripples, mapping the cosmos in liquid light. Some evenings, the western sky turned to copper and the lake matched it, and the city seemed to float between two fires, the sun above and the sun below. In those hours, elders told the origin story again, of wandering years and the promise of an island, of a god's whisper in reeds, of a reed mat becoming a house becoming a quarter becoming a world. Children listened with eyes half closed, lulled by water tapping lightly at the stone. The city's dreaming was not only of beauty. It dreamed in systems, in calendars that braided solar and sacred days, in causeways punctured by bridges that could be raised to let canoes pass like silent thoughts, in night fires that signaled across the lake, in schools where keepers of song taught breath and measure. Where memory fades, the measures remain. Neat cords of quapilli, bundles and orders, white-robed sweepers who kept plazas clean at first light, gardeners who read the canal's surface the way others read stars. To live here was to hear water speak and to answer softly. The city dreamed forward as well as down. From the Eagle House to the precinct of calm water, from the Serpent Wall to the high terraces, everything belonged to a geometry that could be walked, sung, planted. It is said that the city's map could fit inside a drumbeat, 3 steps to water, 2 to wind, 4 to stone. A traveler once wrote that sleeping by Titicaca feels like dreaming inside a mirror. The lake does not merely reflect the sky, it holds it. Every cloud that passes seems to sink, every star appears twice, as above and below. Perhaps this is what the ancients understood, that heaven and earth are not separate realms, but one continuous reflection, folded over itself like a blanket of silver and night. And if you stood upon the temple's upper platform at equinox, the line of light would enter a doorway and come to rest upon a carved disk as gently as a hand on a sleeping shoulder. The builders encoded breath into stone. Modern excavations, careful as prayer, keep finding that encoded breath. Deep under the pavement of Centro Historico, archaeologists lift the lids of old offerings. Coral from distant seas, shark's teeth smoothed by long tides, copal hardened like pale amber tears, little masks of jade and shell, the tiny bones of hummingbirds, messengers of sun and flower. Tenochtitlan, a city of lakes, held the ocean in her under-rooms. The city's heart was a conch, spiraled and echoing. Where science kneels, myth breathes. Where myth sings, science nods. It is said that on certain nights, when rain gathers over the valley and thunder mutters like an ancient drum, the water rises briefly in old places and remembers old paths. Puddles appear along forgotten lines. The streets smell of wet earth and reed. The wind says Chinampa under its breath. Those who walk late hear a faint hollow knocking from the stones, not ominous, only insistent, as if paddles once more press against the city's ribs. The city that dreamed in stone also dreamed of bridges, between islands of life, between seasons, between the seen and the veiled. Somewhere beneath that luminous surface, the kingdom still waits. Its temples may now be coral and silt, its roads traced by drifting reeds, but the geometry remains, a memory etched in water. The fish swim through hallways where priests once walked. The currents carry songs no ear can translate, and in that vast, submerged silence, the city endures, unbroken by time. That is why her offerings reach to the sea and her aqueduct reaches to the hills, why her market gathers mountains and coast in one measured murmur, why her temples speak both flame and rain. To stand in the sacred precinct, then, was to stand in a compass of elements. To stand there now, among buses and bells, is to feel underfoot a different heartbeat, older, slower, patient. Light factual grounding murmurs again. Tenochtitlan's population may have rivaled or exceeded the great cities of Europe in the early 16th century. Its market at Tlatelolco astonished foreign eyes with order and abundance. its aqueduct of Chapultepec, rebuilt more than once, braided clean water into the island. Its causeways bore travelers over leagues of reflective blue. And beneath Mexico City today, the Templo Mayor continues to yield chambers and altars, including a monumental earth deity monolith found in 2006. It's carved, surface glowing with ochres and night. These are the numbers and dates, yes, but numbers are husks if we do not hear the lake inside them. And yet, as all cities must, Tenochtitlan entered a long dusk. Winds changed, strangers arrived. The waters that had cradled the city were drained away over centuries until only fragments of blue remained, like small mirrors laid upon dust. But the dream did not end. Dreams harelidu. As the night grows colder, the mist rises from the lake in slow spirals. It curls over the shore, wraps the reeds, and drifts toward the mountains. In that moment, the water seems to breathe. You can almost hear it, the faint exhale of a world between worlds. They fold themselves into the ground and wait. Beneath the silence of subway tunnels and morning traffic, the island still breathes. A trowel touches clay and finds a tiny shell carried from the Gulf 400 years before a map wore a European name. A shovel meets a serpent wall and pauses. A lamp reveals a tray of star-marked blades that once cut water into light for a ceremony at first rain. The city opens its palm for a moment and then closes it again, courteous, unhurried. It is said that if you stand by the Templo Mayor at night, after the museums sleep and the square is empty but for a few lingering footsteps, a breeze comes down the old causeway and moves the edges of things. Paper flags whisper. Torch bowls remember faint warmth. Somewhere, out of sight, a small water sound persists. Perhaps a fountain. Perhaps the lake, patient as the moon. You look up and the sky leans low, full of the same stars that once doubled in the canals. And for a breath you see the city as she saw herself. Stone lifted into prayer, water holding the sky, gardens drifting like green thoughts, voices measured and calm. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. Perhaps the city still speaks, in puddles after rain, in the sweetness of some Passikill-laden rose, in the distant white wing of a heron crossing a city that forgot it was once a lake. It is said that if you sit quietly enough, you might see a flicker of gold beneath the waves. A single glint that vanishes when you blink. The elders say that is the light of the city calling to its children, reminding them that every civilization is only asleep, waiting for remembrance. Perhaps the dream was never stone at all, but balance. The old agreement between reed and rock, between sun and cloud, between the hand that plants and the hand that builds. So rest now, wanderer. Let the lake rise behind your eyes. See the canoe glide past a wall of carved serpents. See the aqueduct pour a ribbon of mountain water into the fountains of the island. See the market gather maize the color of dawn, obsidian dark as night, salt that shines like frost. Hear the paddle press, the willow leaf fall, the temple stone take one long breath of morning. And as sleep comes, let one thought drift with you across the quiet water. Cities too can dream. Some dream upward in towers and noise. Some dream inward in gardens and mirrors. Tenochtitlan dreamed in both directions at once. Perhaps the city beneath Titicaca was never meant to be found by divers or machines. Perhaps its purpose is to remind us of the fragility of what we build and the patience of what endures. For water is not merely destruction. It is also memory, an element that holds what stone forgets. Its stones learning the language of light, its waters remembering the sky. Perhaps it was never meant to be lost. Perhaps it only changed rooms. From lake to earth, from earth to memory, from memory to the soft chamber behind your closing eyes, where a city still floats at dawn, and the world is held, for a moment perfectly, between reflection and breath. It is said that at the world's edge, where the deserts of salt meet the clouds of heaven, there lies a mirror so vast it can hold the sun itself. And so, as you drift toward sleep, imagine the stillness of that high lake, the cold breath of the mountains, the slow movement of unseen waves. Somewhere below, in perfect darkness, lies a kingdom lit by the soft glow of eternity. Its walls hum with the rhythm of the world's first dawn. Its bells ring only in dreams. a place where sky and earth vanish into one another. No horizon, no border, only light. When the rains fall upon the Sala de Uyuni in Bolivia, the land becomes a sea of reflection, stretching farther than sight, deeper than imagination. They call it El Espejo del Mundo, the mirror of the world. But among those who live near its silent rim, it is known by a gentler name, the mirror of forgotten suns. At dawn, it is almost invisible. The wind moves lightly, the salt crust glows pale as bone, and the air carries a faint hum, like the ringing left behind by a struck bell. As the sun rises, the mirror awakens. Not suddenly, but softly, as if remembering what it once was. The surface catches fire, not with flame, but with reflection. Clouds drift below your feet. Stars seem to hang in the sand. Perhaps it was never lost. For a few hours each morning, you stand not on the world but inside it, balanced between two skies. It is said that in ancient times, this place was a lake, Minchin, vast and sacred. When the waters withdrew, they left behind salt like tears, a shimmering crust that remembers the ocean's dream. To the Aymara and Quechua people, it became holy ground, a realm of crossing, where the dead travel between worlds and the living glimpse eternity. They say the salt is what remains of a goddess's sorrow. Long ago, the mother of the mountains wept for her lost child, and her tears mixed with milk and earth to form this white sea. Even now, when the light grows too bright to bear, it feels like standing in the afterglow of that grief. Beneath the silence, the mirror hums with memory. Scientists speak of lithium and crystallization, of a desert that holds the world's lightest metal, the same element that powers our modern hearts of glass and wire. But even the scientists lower their voices here. Perhaps it was simply waiting. No equation can measure what it feels like to see the sky flowing beneath your feet, to watch the sun rise twice, once above you, once below. It is as if the world itself were remembering how to dream. Travelers who come here speak of a strange disorientation, the loss of depth, of direction, of self. Step forward, and you no longer know where your shadow belongs. The clouds beneath you move, but you do not. The sun burns from two directions, and in that weightless confusion, something ancient stirs. The sense that all things, above, below, within, are reflections of one another. The ancients called it Pachacuti, the great turning, the moment when the world folds and renews itself. Perhaps the mirror is its sign, the world bending back to look at its own face. It is said that when the stars rise above Uyuni, the sky becomes endless in both directions. For the sound of listening, each point of light appears twice, and you find yourself standing between two constellations, one of heaven, one of earth. Astronomers who camp here for their observations say that no other place on the planet shows the cosmos so clearly. And yet, the locals say the mirror is not for seeing stars, but for remembering them, for recalling the suns that came before ours, the forgotten fires that burned and vanished before memory began. In Aymara myth, time does not move forward but backward. The past lies before us, visible and known. The future moves behind, unseen. Here, in the mirror of forgotten suns, you understand what that means. Each reflection is a moment already gone, a light that has already traveled. You walk upon memory itself, visible, endless, unreachable. It humbles the heart, this understanding, that every sun we see is already history, every reflection a gentle ghost. There are nights when lightning dances on the far horizon, and its flicker repeats across the salt 100-fold. It is said that in the high plateaus of South America, where wind sculpts the dust into sacred patterns and the horizon seems to breathe, there coils a serpent made of stone. It does not move, and yet it travels. It stretches for miles across the desert, vanishing and reappearing like a thought half-remembered. A road, a body, a memory etched into the earth itself. The people who live near it call it Amaru Marka, the serpent of the land. To others, it is simply the sky road. The whole desert becomes a field of fireflies, brief, bright, vanishing. You stand in that light, feeling it pass through you, and you understand how fragile illumination is. The gods, perhaps, placed this mirror here not to show us perfection, but to remind us that even the brightest sun forgets itself eventually, that every brilliance must one day rest. Beneath the silence, the salt whispers. Kneel and you can hear it. A faint crackling, the slow movement of crystal expanding with heat, contracting with cold. Each grain clicks against its neighbor, and together they make a music older than language. This is the sound of time settling, of the Earth's breath measured in centuries. Archaeologists have found traces of early travelers across the Sala, paths where caravans once crossed, carrying shells from the Pacific, obsidian from the highlands, feathers from the low jungle. The salt flats connected what the mountains divided. Perhaps that is the mirror's deeper secret. It is a bridge, not of stone, but of reflection. From above, it looks like an ancient design. Long, winding embankments of rock that twist through plains where nothing should grow. Some scholars believe they are part of the Nazca lines of Peru, those vast geoglyphs carved into the desert floor more than 2,000 years ago, visible only from the heavens. The serpent is among them, immense, deliberate, facing a constellation long forgotten. A reminder that even distance can dissolve in light. At dusk, the world begins to close again. The mirror dims, the edges of the sky reappear, and the desert returns to its quiet shape. For a few heartbeats, you can see both suns, the one above setting into flame, the one below fading into shadow. Then darkness arrives, gentle and whole. The stars bloom across two skies, their reflections trembling like memory. You stand in the middle of infinity, and you realize you are not small. You are simply part of the pattern, a reflection within a reflection, dreaming the same dream as the world. It is said that those who sleep on the salt at night dream of light, not bright, but vast. They wake with tears in their eyes and cannot say why. It begins near the desert's edge, where the earth hardens into red clay and the wind hums with low vibration. There, a single curve rises, carved from packed stones, tracing a spiral before unfurling into a sweeping arc that stretches toward the Andes. To walk beside it is to feel as if you are following something alive, a path that moves not forward, but inward into the marrow of the world. Perhaps it is the weight of beauty, or the soundless reminder that everything we are is both fleeting and eternal. We live as reflections, and reflections cannot hold still. The mirror teaches gently. To look upon it is to see how the sky forgives itself for burning, how the earth forgives the sky for leaving, how all things meet again in silence. The sun forgets itself in reflection, and in forgetting remembers. That is the secret written in salt and fire, that memory is not what we hold, but what we let return. And so the journey ends where it began, in silence, beneath roots and rivers, under pyramids and stars, through temples and deserts and dreams. One truth repeats itself, that nothing is ever truly lost. The city beneath the roots still breathes. The Nazca people who shaped this land built hundreds of such figures, birds, fish, monkeys, spirals, trapezoids, each drawn with impossible precision, though they had no way to see them from above. Some believe they walked the lines in ritual procession, offerings of maize or shells in their hands, tracing the shapes of sacred beings they believed lived between heaven and earth. Others think the lines were messages, giant prayers sent to the gods of sky and water, begging for rain in a land where rain almost never came. The serpent still wins beneath the stars. The temple still waits for dawn. The roads of the clouds still hum with ghostly footsteps. The lake still hides its golden kingdom. The oracle still receives its dagger of light. The mask still glows softly with human sorrow. The forest still whispers its echoes through stone. The river still carries the sky upon its back. The city of water still dreams in its reflection. And the mirror, vast and white, still remembers every sun. But there is something about the serpent that feels different. Its head faces the rising sun of the winter solstice. Its tail points toward the constellation of Scorpius, a region of the sky the ancients called the Dark River. Even now, when the desert night clears and the Milky Way spills across the heavens, the serpent's path seems to mirror the stars above, as if the builders carved the sky itself into the dust. All across the Americas, in their ruins and rivers and songs, the same quiet promise remains, that the world remembers itself even when we forget, that light and water and stone are only forms of memory, patient enough to wait for us to listen again. Perhaps that is why these stories draw us, not because they are old, but because they are still happening. Every drop of rain that falls upon the forest carries the breath of a lost civilization. Every stone we touch has already heard the heartbeat of 1,000 souls. And every night, when the sky folds itself over us, we walk once more among the ancients, guided by the same light that led them home. It is said that when we sleep, the world speaks softly to us, in the voice of a river, in the hum of distant insects. It is said that the serpent was more than symbol, it was a map, not a map of land, but of spirit. The Andean cultures believed that the world was divided into 3 realms: Hanan Pasha, the upper world of light; K Pasha, the world of the living; and Uku Pasha, the world below, the hidden place of roots, ancestors, and dreams. The serpent was the messenger between them. It moved through all realms, under soil, through water, across air. To carve its image upon the earth was to create a bridge between worlds. In the faint crackle of salt beneath moonlight, tells us what it has always told us. Remember that you are not apart from the earth, but of it. Remember that you are not lost. You are only between breaths. Remember that you are made of the same dust that once built cities, the same water that once reflected gods, the same light that still lingers in the mirror of forgotten suns. And when you wake, slowly, gently, the echoes of those ancient worlds will still be with you. In the warmth of dawn, in the quiet of your own breath, you will feel them, not as history. As the wind sweeps over the plateau, the stones hum faintly. To the untrained ear, it is only air, but to those who have walked there at dusk, the sound carries rhythm, a long exhale that seems to pulse from the ground itself. Local herders sometimes pause beside it, whispering short prayers in Quechua or Aymara, touching the dust with their palms. They say the serpent listens, that it carries messages not upward but inward, down through the veins of the earth to where all beginnings sleep. But as home, so rest now. The journey is complete. The past is still alive, and the world, vast and patient, is still dreaming through you. Beneath the surface of the desert, scientists have found layers of charcoal, pottery, and shells, remnants of ancient offerings. These are not random. They mark points along the serpent's curve where water once flowed. The Nazca understood that beneath the barren plain ran hidden rivers, underground aquifers feeding the rare oases that sustained life. The serpent, then, was not only celestial but practical, a guide to water beneath the dust. In its winding shape, spirituality and survival intertwined. At night, when the moon casts pale light upon the desert, the serpent's form glows faintly. The white stones, placed centuries ago, catch the light like scales. It is an eerie, sacred sight, a creature of stone shimmering under stars, as if breathing in sleep. No wonder the ancients called it the Amaru, a word meaning both serpent and divine energy. To them, the serpent was not a beast of fear, but a force of renewal. When it shed its skin, it symbolized rebirth. When it coiled, it became the spiral of creation itself. In Inca cosmology, the serpent represented wisdom and transition. Carvings of Amaru appear across temples in Cusco and Tiwanaku, its body interlaced with pumas and condors, the 3 sacred animals of their universe. The condor soared through the upper world. The puma ruled the present. The serpent flowed through the unseen. Together they formed the cycle of existence. The Nazca serpent may be one of the oldest expressions of that triad, a road not for feet, but for spirit. Whispers tell us that those who walked the sky road did so in silence. They carried no banners, sang no songs. They moved with the rhythm of the wind, their bare feet pressing into the dust in patterns known only to the elders. When they reached the serpent's head, they waited for the first light of dawn. At that precise moment, the solstice sun touching the horizon, the shadow of the serpent's curve aligned perfectly with the far mountains, forming a glowing path of light that seemed to ascend into the sky. Some modern archaeologists have confirmed strange alignments between the Nazca lines and solar events. At certain times of year, the sunrise or sunset matches the direction of specific figures. The serpent, it seems, was not only a prayer to the heavens, it was an instrument of time. Perhaps this is why it was built so carefully, each stone placed with reverence. To mark time for the ancients was not to control it, but to honor its cycles, the eternal breathing of the cosmos. As the centuries passed, the winds shifted. Sand covered the serpent's body, hiding it from view. Only with the arrival of flight, in the 20th century, did humanity once again see what had been sleeping beneath its own feet. When pilots flew over the Nazca Desert in the 1930s, they saw the serpent uncoiling in the dust, its head glinting under sun. It had been waiting for us to look down from the heavens, as the heavens once looked upon it. Even now, scientists debate its meaning. Was it a calendar, a ritual path, a map of the stars, or something beyond all that? A form of communication written in the only language the cosmos understands, geometry and silence. Perhaps the serpent was never meant to be solved. Perhaps its true purpose is the act of wondering itself, to remind us that there are still mysteries vast enough to silence us. As night deepens over the plateau, the wind cools, and the sky fills with impossible stars. The Milky Way arches directly above, a luminous river across blackness. If you trace its curve with your eyes, you see the same pattern. A long silver coil stretching from horizon to horizon. And below, hidden by shadow, the serpent mirrors it perfectly. The ancients saw this connection clearly. They believed the Milky Way was the celestial river of souls, the path spirits took to return home. To carve its reflection into the earth was to ensure that heaven and humanity remained bound together. The serpent was their promise, that no matter how far one wandered, there would always be a road leading back to the stars. It is said that when you sleep near the Nazca Plain, the earth dreams with you. The wind softens, and you might hear a faint rattling beneath your pillow, the sound of shifting sand over old stones. Some travelers say they have woken to find faint patterns drawn around their tents, perfect spirals etched in the dust, as if the serpent had passed in the night.